If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, let me give you a rundown. Basically, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Here how it's work. Anchor lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to the most popular listening platforms, including Spotify, with a single tap. Anchor is also the only place you can publish video podcasts to Spotify. With Anchor, creators can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. And the amount that you can upload on Anchor is unlimited, which is really helpful for me. And it also helps you with getting statistics for your podcast in terms of where people are listening from, so that you know how many people listen to your podcast all over the world.
Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NVLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoyed today's episodes.
The next group chat for people with NLD or other learning challenges will be on June 18th at 10 a.m. Pacific time zone. And for those of you who haven't been to a group before, it's just a safe place for you to talk about some challenges you may have with your learning challenge, and to be able to feel like you can vent if you need to others who know what it's like to be neurodiverse and not neurotypical. I also want to mention to you that I just launched my podcast swag on Wednesday of this week and have a page for it on my website, and I will also send you the link to it in the podcast description, and I will also send it to you in the newsletter that I usually send out on Fridays. I am now selling t-shirts, water bottles, and a backpack, and they all have the podcast logo and title on it and the tagline. So I am looking forward to watching the sales and seeing who buys them, and spreading the word more about my podcast. Today's podcast episode will be the fourth part of the interview with Anna and me.
And, some of the other things that that I was thinking was, and you kind of already got to this question earlier when you were talking about some of the things that you wish you didn't have with your learning challenges. But, you know, in general, do you ever wish you didn't have any of them?
Just didn't have any of the diagnosis at all.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's kind of hard to say that, but yeah.
That's kind of something that I've thought of on and off my whole life. Because, for example, I got a diagnosis of some kind when I was 5 years old, so I didn't have much sense of self before I was 5. So I've definitely thought of that concept before, and during much of my life, I've leaned towards although I would like to, have all those skills I mentioned earlier. Overall, I would not want to switch out my kind of neurodivergent brain for a different brain, because I am proud of the person I am. I am proud of my passions and my interests and how I present in the world. And I don't think that a lot of those things would be the same if I didn't have the unique mind that I do have. So other than maybe that short little blip in high school when I was starting to kind of get really down about it, overall throughout my life, I would answer that question with kind of, no, I'm glad I am the person I am. And no, I don't wish it would go away. I am the person I am.
It's okay. I agree that way too, because I've learned to, like you were saying, to work around the roadblocks. That was a good way to phrase it. That NLD presents. That I've learned that it makes me who I am, and that I am actually glad that of that, because if I didn't have NLD, I wouldn't be good at all the verbal things I am, or all the audio things I am, or I wouldn't be good at memorizing people's names or their birthdays, or other things like that. And I even remember when I was aware of that when I was a kid and I didn't know I had NLD. I was like, how does my brain do that?
Yep.
I was like, I became aware of that when I went to summer camps, and I would look at the group photos afterwards of everybody who went there, and I was like, how can I remember everybody's name in this photo?
Yeah.
And they would be like maybe 300 or 500 people in the photo. I'm like, how am I doing this? and some people, came over and over, and some were new people. I'm like, okay, I don't know how I'm doing this, but I just was doing it. And I actually, I talked about that in one of the podcast episodes, and I was like, I'm going to look back at a photo because I was curious if I could still do it.
Yeah.
And I think I got half of the names.
Nice.
I was like, yeah, that's not too bad.
Like all those years later.
Yeah. I was like, because I know some of the people still have kept in contact with them, but not all of them.
Yeah.
So it's like, how does my brain keep that memory?
I remember conversations verbatim.
Yeah.
And I'd even do that. Like I would be explaining something to somebody, and someone else in the room would be like, you remember that exactly how I think that conversation went? I'm like, I probably did. I don't know.
That happens to me too. Yeah, I will remember, I'll be able to summarize a conversation I've had with my parents really well, and they'll comment on it, and I'm thinking in my mind, it's probably because of NLD. I won't say it, but I'm thinking that. And that's a good thing, because when I'm talking on the phone to somebody at my job, I don't have to write that much down if I'm taking a message, because I can remember most of it. But I do write down the number, because sometimes I won't remember all of it. Um, and sometimes I write down a little bit of the message, but usually not all of it, um, just the bullet points. And then, whenever I pass it on to who it's for, it's pretty easy for me. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's where NLD comes in as a gift for that.
Yeah, I
Um,
completely.
so, what I was also going to ask is, do you ever feel like NLD or your other learning challenges might be a burden for you, or just feel heavy?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does feel so, I really kind of identify with a woman in the physical health community.
Mm-hmm.
Lupus, I believe, is her diagnosis. Has this theory she calls spoon theory. So she talks about, like she only has a certain number of spoons and all these daily things because of her illness and how it, uses up her spoons. So kind of managing NLD for me has that challenge of trying to manage all the spoons of the symptoms of it or the weaknesses of it or the traits of it or whatever words terminology anyone wants or prefers can get kind of exhausting and that can actually have the word burden could be used for that. So actually try and create days in my life where I limit the things that are most challenging for me so I can put them somewhere else. So example, I might limit a lot of things that are challenging for me in my personal life because I know my work day is going to have aspects, have the challenges. Um, and that can be unfortunate because that can take away from some energy to live a more full life. Like there are certain things that like I have moved a few times to areas I didn't know very well, like where I live now. I had never been here before I moved here. So those things can kind of affect my life. So I won't just be like, I'll take a job in California, I'll just move there, just at the drop of a hat because of the challenges it brings to my life. But um, yeah, so that can kind of be the ways that it is sort of a burden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense to me because if I think about NLD and I would say my chronic migraines, because those can be burdensome too, that it can be they both can be burdensome or heavy at times because like you were saying with the challenges they present, if you run into a lot of challenges one day versus only a few the next day, then it can be easier to get through one day versus the other. Um, and I think for me, I've probably made it be easier on myself because I work at the challenges more consistently and constantly. Um, and I also am in an environment where people try to help me with the challenges. Um, so if I wasn't doing that, working at the challenges, or I wasn't in an environment that helped with them, that would probably make it be more burdensome because then I wouldn't have as much support. Um,
I actually have worked kind of sort of similar to what you were describing, work to have like an NLD friendly life.
mhm.
I feel like when I create kind of an NLD friendly life, I accomplish more and I am able to do more and have my talents kind of come to the forefront more because I've created a life that allows that to happen.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Where, like, if I look back on before I knew about my NLD, my life was, I would say it was harder because I didn't know what I had. And so it was harder for me to know why it was challenging. And it, so I wasn't really, I didn't, so because I didn't know why, I wasn't able to work out them and able to make them easier. But because I have since I was 19, I've been able to make it be easier. So I think that's definitely been a blessing for me. And kind of a blessing in disguise, because it's like you wouldn't think that challenges would make your life easier, but if you decide to work at them and try to make them into maybe a strength instead of a weakness or difference, then it can make it be easier.
Yeah.
So what I was also going to ask was, what do you try to tell others who have NLD as a motivation for when they get discouraged? And you can answer that for your other learning challenges too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one part is kind of don't give up, because I mean, one thing I've noticed in my life is during some of kind of my darkest times, I believe that it was going to get better. And it has in so many different ways, at so many different times, at different stages of my life. So that is just kind of a huge thing. And also kind of don't let other people's kind of opinions and perspective discourage you either. So there might be people that, will tell you can't accomplish something. So I was actually, my mother was told when I was diagnosed that she should stop thinking about me going to college. This is when I was 5 years old. She said that my mother shouldn't even be seeing me as someone who should go to college. And if I graduate high school, that was going to be some amazing feat. Yeah, so I was a very strong student all through middle school, high school. I remember a friend coming up to me once, like, how come you don't have to study on the weekends? I'm like, huh? Like, I feel like you don't work as hard at me at school. I'm like, I don't know. School's not that hard for me. It was just something that was, by that time in my life, true for me. And I mean, granted, my mother didn't tell me to my college graduation that was told to her when I was 5, but I did have many people along the line. I mean, I had a professor that wanted to petition me not to graduate with one of my degrees. And then I actually chose not to graduate with that degree. But I mean, I found different ways around that and different ways to meet my goals. My cat's about to jump on me.
Oh, that's okay.
To achieve things. And so I did not let people's perceptions of what I could accomplish define what I could accomplish. So that would be something that I would say to other people, that, yourself as well as other people might kind of put limits on you that you do not have to live by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying, because I was kind of chuckling about the comment one of your students made in school about studying, because I can relate to that. Even though I was homeschooled before college, I feel like I studied my butt off in high school to get straight A's, because even though I didn't know that I had an LD, then I just felt like everything was challenging for me.
Mm-hmm.
And not every subject, but almost every subject, definitely math and English with the writing, and science when it had math in it, like chemistry and physics.
Yeah.
The only subjects I think that were easier for me were history and biology, and interestingly, I was okay at geometry. But I would definitely say that not giving up would be the motivation I would use too, because people are gonna be they might be discouraging to you whether they know about NLD or not, and that you don't want that to get to you, because if you do, then that's not going to help.
Yeah.
And so I know for me, when I was, at my last couple of years of college, I wasn't really sure if I was going to graduate. And what I used as my motivation was my mom knew I was going to graduate. And so I believed in her that
Yeah.
and that fact. And that helped me get through those last 2 years because I wasn't so sure about that.
Mm-hmm.
And like you were saying about the opinions, that's a good thing too, because some people may not have the same opinion as you do, and that may be because of their different experiences or just their understanding of something.
Yeah.
So that's definitely makes sense to me. And then my next question was going to be, what would you tell somebody who doesn't know they have NLD or another learning disability or challenge, but they suspect they have something? Like, what would you encourage them to do or tell them to do?
If diagnosis is doable, so I mean it can be expensive, not every insurance pays for it, so it's something that is achievable for everybody at every stage in their lives. But if diagnosis is something that is attainable, that was what I was trying to do, attainable, not doable, then I would actually recommend that. I know everyone has different opinions, but I can just be, I don't know, to me, it really led me to just a higher level of self-acceptance and I think a higher level of achievement in my life. So once I kind of understood where the weaknesses are, where the strengths were, it allowed me space to figure out where I wanted to go around that to get to where I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
I'd recommend diagnosis and also just kind of self-acceptance in general, to remember what your strengths are, what you're proud of about yourself, and kind of to realize that even though the NVLD had a profile of kind of differences and weaknesses and everything might be different than other people experience, that doesn't mean they're worse. So, like someone might not be able to identify with my specific types of challenges. That doesn't mean that they have less challenges or, our challenges are not better or worse than each other.
Mm-hmm.
They're just different and we all have value. And for other people with kind of NLD too, or people who might kind of suspect they have it and they're kind of maybe, feeling sort of uncomfortable with that, because it's suspecting you have something usually kind of comes with maybe some sadness about your experience or some negative feelings, to just kind of realize that you are okay the way you are as anybody else is.
Yeah, I would agree with you to have self-acceptance for who you are is important because, usually with learning challenges, there isn't a cure. And unfortunately, you have to be able to learn to live with them. But I would say what can make them be easier is, like you said, self-acceptance and also being able to get a diagnosis, because then you can, like you were saying, learning where the strengths and the differences are so that you can help yourself out and also others can help you, and being able to try to do research about the learning challenge that you have so that you can try to tackle the challenges that you have. And then the last question I was going to ask you is, what is your proudest accomplishment?
So I turned 39 last month now. Yeah, it's March. So I turned 39 the 23rd of February. And kind of right before my birthday, I realized that I've accomplished my actual dreams before I was 40, which I didn't accomplish a lot of like what a lot of people would consider their dreams by 30. So like I did get married. I did get into a career. So in my career in supported employment, my last year was actually as a supported employment manager. So I did get top of the career field because I worked in a community mental health center, which meant that I was like one of the only people that wasn't a social worker or have a psychology type degree. So there was no higher up in that field that I could possibly go than a manager of supported employment. So I achieved that goal. I was a newspaper reporter, so as like a kid, you're when I was growing up, things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were cool. My maiden name was Super, so Superman was cool, and there was always characters that were reporters. So I became a newspaper reporter. I mean, I accomplished that goal. And I just started thinking about, like I moved to a major city for a little while. I grew up in a very, very rural area, and I didn't want to only have that experience. I lived alone for a little while, so I just realized that every dream that I did dream, I've actually accomplished. And so now I actually can start coming up with new dreams that I never thought I was going to accomplish. Yeah. So that was a really kind of exciting thing to realize. I'm advocating for neurodiversity now, which is something I want to do to one level. I've actually wanted to do it since I was 10. Mm-hmm. And then I want to do it 11 years ago, even more so when I had a more specific diagnosis. So I've achieved that dream. So that was probably my biggest accomplishment, is realizing that when I had all these times in my life where I thought I was never going to live up to certain things, I've accomplished all the dreams that I actually have dreamt.
Good for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I kind of have two accomplishments that I can think of. Usually the first one for me that comes to my mind is graduating college, because I went to UC Berkeley, and I wasn't even thinking I could get into Berkeley because of not because of NLD, because I didn't know it then, but because of just not being as good in school as my brother. But he was the one who encouraged me to apply, because he also went there, and he was like, I think you can get in. So I did, and I still remember the day that I found out that I got in, and I had to read my acceptance letter twice. I was like, what? And I remember when I called my brother and told him, he was so happy. And so was my mom. She was inside the store. She had to go outside because she was going to scream. And she didn't want people to think she was, like crazy or something. Why are you screaming in the store, lady? But that makes sense, thinking about that now. And my dad was, he doesn't usually get emotional that much, but I guess he tears in his eyes. He was very proud of me. And when I graduated, they were all very proud of me too, because, not that they weren't proud of my brother when he graduated, but for different reasons. Mm-hmm. I did it with NLD, and my mom helped me. So when she went to my department graduation and heard the speeches, she could kind of get some of the inside jokes that people were talking about. So mm-hmm. that was kind of fun for her. And so I think she had more of a sense of accomplishment with that than my brother or my dad did, because she helped me. But my brother did help me too, because he went to Berkeley, so he could help me with some of the classes, because he knew the level that they would be at. Mm-hmm. And the other accomplishment that I mentioned earlier was getting out of debt. Yeah. I know it's not at the degree of student loan debt that some people have, because it's not anywhere near that, but it still felt heavy for me to have it. And when I got out of it last year, I definitely felt freer and just happier, and was able to be like, okay, now I can start saving towards the goals I wanted to, because I wasn't able to before, because of being in debt. And also realizing, okay, I don't want to get back into that because I know how hard it is to get out of it.
Yeah.
So, even though that was a bad mistake, I definitely learned a very good lesson from it.
Yeah, a lot of growth.
So that is actually the end of the interview, but thank you for letting me interview you. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So do you want to say anything before I end the recording?
Yeah, so I'll just mention that the blog that I mentioned is called This NVLD Life. So the perspective I'm coming from is the fact that, all of our experiences are different. So this is just my story along with my kind of advocacy for others. So let's see. And that's actually the last thing.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because then people can go look for it if they want to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So as I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.